Hey, what's going on everybody? Nerfed here, and in today's video we're going to be discussing, is Last Epoch too easy? And I'm going to do my best to keep this video as short as possible because I just played Repo recently with some friends and had a great time, and I honestly can't wait to make that video as well.
Who the fuck just got shot?
Dallas. Okay, so before we talk about whether or not Last Epoch is too easy, we really need to talk about what makes an ARPG easy to begin with. There's also other things to take into consideration, like whether you're going through the initial campaign, whether you're just encountering the end game, or whether you're at the pinnacle content of the end game. So we need to take into consideration things like player power and how quickly we're getting player power. We have to take into consideration mob AI and whether it's smart AI or dumb AI. We also have to take into consideration boss mechanics. Do bosses have mechanics? Are they challenging mechanics? Do you even see the mechanics? So let's tackle player power first. Essentially, it seems that getting player power in Last Epoch, especially with how easy the crafting system is to grasp early on in the game and how usable it is, player power just seems to be no problem at all. The issue also seems to be with the shrines that you can get throughout the campaign. Personally, I think that the shrines are a little overkill through leveling in the campaign. I think a shrine that you get should complement your build, not necessarily be an entire powerhouse itself. And it seems the shrines in Last Epoch are turned up to like 5,000%. So I think if those were tuned down a little more, the player power wouldn't seem so insane when going through the story. But for the sake of getting through it quickly on multiple alts, I can see why this would be beneficial. In terms of the mob AI, there doesn't seem to be a big distinction between whether or not the AI is smart or dumb. It seems like pretty basic AI. One thing I will say that I do enjoy about Last Epoch is that it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of on-death effects. Basically meaning when I kill a mob, it dies instead of killing a mob, and then it needs to do a final move that can potentially one-shot me before it dies, which I've always complained about in ARPGs. So I feel like because there is a lack of dying from random explosions and on death effects, it can also make the campaign feel easy as well. Now with bossing, I'm specifically talking about the bosses through the leveling campaign. We'll talk about monoliths and empowered monoliths in a bit. But through the campaign, I will say that one thing Last Epoch definitely does really well with bosses is ensuring that you do see some mechanics without making it feel like you're hitting boss invulnerability phases that you can't get past. For example, if I get a boss to 75% of its health, it's going to get a ward or energy shield buff, basically 100%, and then it decays over time. And as it's decaying, you are able to deal damage to the boss, which will cause it to, decrease faster without moving the boss's health. So it does kind of put you in a position where you get to see mechanics, you get to do mechanics, you get to feel like you're in a boss fight, while at the same time also feeling like there's never a point where you don't want to attack. Because the last thing you want is for a boss to do a mechanic and you're just kind of walking around in an ARPG, just kind of waiting for this mechanic to end. But with the way that it's set up and the ward on the health bar, you don't have to. You can choose to walk around. The ward will decay without damage done to it over time, although it'll be slower, which means you're going to be doing the mechanics longer. If you decide to do damage to the boss to get the ward down faster, this is where builds get complimented for having a lot of damage rather than having a lot of damage. And now the boss is invulnerable, then having a lot of damage again. Oh, now the boss is invulnerable, and then damage again. Oh, boss is invulnerable. This, it kind of takes out the monotonous, like, I have all this damage, but you just keep making the boss invincible every 25%. And more so, you just keep making the boss take less damage or have increased health for this portion, which if your build still does a lot of damage, you are still rewarded for that. So I think that's great. The only thing is, again, with the player power scaling early in the game, I feel like the bosses are kind of trivialized unless you're doing hardcore. So I would say, in terms of campaign bossing difficulty, I would say mechanic wise, it's not too difficult. You can pretty much figure out all the mechanics doing the boss once or twice. Um, and with player power, you kill the boss so fast that it doesn't feel like there's much difficulty there. Okay, so TLDR, going through the leveling campaign, player power is very fast. Shrines are way OP. Bosses are very easy to kill, but you do get to see the mechanics, which are pretty cool. Okay, so let's get on to the end game. So the end game starts with monoliths, which then leads to empowered monoliths, which then leads to corrupted empowered monoliths. And monoliths are basically the equivalent of wipe maps in Path of Exile, I'd say. In terms of difficulty, they are not difficult at all. I would say they are basically just an attachment to the end game in terms of difficulty scaling, which there is none. Basically, from the beginning of monoliths all the way to the end of monoliths, there's no power scaling. It's pretty much the same all the way through. It gives you some time, basically starting monoliths to the end of monoliths, to get some end game gear acquired, but essentially it's not much of a difficulty at all. Okay, so then when we get into empowered monoliths, there's kind of a caveat to this. So empowered monoliths are basically monoliths that are corrupted, and the corruption, I believe, is set to 100. And so you can equate these to basically red maps, I would say, in yellow to red maps in Path of Exile. And the difficulty is, this is where the difficulty in the game starts to show. This is where your build starts to show whether or not you really have a good build, whether you have a bad build, whether you know what you're doing, whether you're up to date on your gear, whether you have correctly placed your passives, because the mobs start to gain power, they start to gain health, this starts to become a little more challenging. It does start to get to the point where the degen starts to really degen, and the one-shot mechanics will actually start one-shotting you again if you are not paying attention, which is primarily where the excitement started for me in Last Epoch. So basically, think of it as mapping. You're going through each monolith has different mods on it that can empower the mobs that are on that monolith, either giving them more health or making them do more damage, etc. Bossing's pretty much similar. The only difference is that the bosses have a lot more HP. You don't necessarily notice the difference in the bossing too much until you start fighting the Shades of Orbis and the Harbingers. Once you start fighting the Harbingers and the Shades, I would say probably about 150 to 200 corruption is when you really start to feel the game crank up a bit. Now, this is kind of where I would address those YouTube comments that say that Last Epoch is too easy, or that I will not be playing Last Epoch because it's too easy. And to you guys, I would say, if your only experience in Last Epoch is playing the campaign up to monoliths, then I'd have to agree. I would say, yeah, the game's too easy. It could definitely be more challenging, more difficult. But you're not in the end game. That's not even the start of the end game. The start of the end game is the empowered monoliths. The start of the end game is adding the corruption to those monoliths, making them even more difficulty. Making them even more difficult. Adding mods to them, which increases, the drop rates of items. It increases the chances of higher tier affixes, which encourages better builds, which better gear for better crafting. So I would say overall, Last Epoch's difficulty, not very difficult at all, up until you get to the true end game, which I would say is Empowered Monoliths plus Corruption. If you have not gone to Empowered Monoliths plus Corruption, the game is not difficult. I haven't even fought Abberoth yet. I can only assume he's difficult. I don't know entirely how much corruption I have to get up to before I do that. I've kind of been pushing corruption, and then when I start feeling myself slowing down in my monolith clear speed, I start focusing on my gear a little more. And then once I start clearing, quickly or replace one or two pieces, I start putting corruption on the monoliths again. This is my first playthrough, so I haven't actually done this before. I haven't fought the final boss, nor have I tried Uber, so I'm not going as fast as some other streamers probably are who have gone through this before. But I do want to make sure that I'm, giving every part of the game a fair shot in the end game in terms of actually assessing whether it's fun, whether it's not fun, whether it's difficult, whether it's easy, whether it even makes sense, or whether it feels like it should just be removed from the game entirely. But yeah. Overall, I've really enjoyed Last Epoch. I've really enjoyed my build. I've enjoyed the end game. And honestly, I look forward to fighting Abberoth. I look forward to experiencing the true end game difficulty of Uber Abberoth and seeing where the min maxing of the build comes in. But overall, I've been having a great time with the game. I've been having a lot of fun grinding monoliths, finding different ways to make my build stronger. I figured out how to turn unique items into legendary items, which has been, wow, such a change in our character's power. What a great system, by the way, to just be able to take uniques that, might after a while seem redundant and not useful to pick up, and then be able to take crafted items and then combine them. It's a great system. I'm enjoying it. I think it's great. I think the game's great overall. I'm looking forward to the final boss. We are going to be playing some other games on stream. I know V Rising just pushed their update today. Don't be surprised if you see some V Rising videos popping up. So if you're a V Rising fan, make sure you like and subscribe so you get updated for that content. We've been playing Repo with friends. We just started that last night. That was such a good time. I haven't laughed that hard in so long. So don't be surprised if you see a Repo video coming up soon. Aside from that, yeah, I just wanted to come out with the video. I know I've only put out a few videos since I started playing Last Epoch. Well, really, I've only really started making a few videos recently. So, yeah, just work. My IRL job got really busy this last week. So, it was really, I just didn't have time for it on top of streaming and keeping up with my daily IRL stuff. So I'm glad I was able to get this video pushed out for you guys. I'm going to do my best to try and get at least 2 videos pushed out a week. It won't always be Last Epoch, and it may not always be an ARPG. I can guarantee you it won't always be an ARPG. We play all sorts of games here. So yeah, be looking out for that. We're still grinding Last Epoch. If you come on the stream, feel free to say hey. Chances are we'll still be playing it. I don't know how many videos we're gonna come out with, but I know we'll probably drop some content once we fight Abberoth. But yeah, aside from that, you guys have fun playing games and look for the next video soon. Thanks.